How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I have got a very special guest for you all. Today, I'm joined by a powerlifting coach working with Reactive Training Systems. Today, I am joined by the one and only John Garafano. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on, Stephen. Really appreciate it.
No worries at all. Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. And I know we chatted a little bit before we started recording, but how are you? What have you been up to? What's been happening in your world?
Thanks. Appreciate that. Well, personally, me and my wife are just about to welcome our newest addition to our family, our fourth child. So big family, and baby's gonna come any day now. So happy that we could do this recording prior to me having very little sleep, as you can imagine.
Ah,
Uh,
nice.
Yeah, outside of that, just super excited to be here today. I've been really excited to be with Reactive Training Systems since 2018 and have my role grow over the number of years and be able to help tons and tons of athletes, both in our training lab as well as direct athletes that I coach. So excited to be here today and talk about that, and hoping to step back on the platform. Let's see, as an M1, I'm not too far away, about a year away. So by that time, hopefully I'll be sleeping. Uh, Step back on the platform as an M1 equipped.
Oh, nice. And are you training at the minute, or is it just kind of balancing that with everything else? Obviously, family and coaching. Are you just trying to balance in training at the minute before a full prep before a competition?
Yeah, so I started out this year thinking that I would compete again because it's been a number of years. I had a really difficult neck injury about 2.5 years ago, which sort of left me in a position where I couldn't even do one push-up,
Right.
let alone do the competition lifts. I couldn't do any of them actually. And so I had to kind of work my way back to that. And it took a long time.
Yeah.
So just recently, I've been hitting numbers that I would expect of myself from like 2019. So that's
Wow.
really cool to see the strength come back. And I was getting really excited. I'm like, oh, cool. I'll start competing again. This will be fun. And then my wife got pregnant. I'm like, what's another year, right? So
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty cool, especially
yes.
if you had an injury like that to then, look at some of the numbers that you've done before. That's, that's pretty cool because I know this is, and you might get used to this as we chat over the podcast. Some tangents thrown
Mhm.
in there, but I know sometimes that injuries like that can throw people off completely and lose motivation and could sometimes step away for too long rather than actually coming back. Maybe a little bit better when rehab's done correctly.
Absolutely. And are you okay if I like just dive into that topic and we just start chatting about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So, it was an interesting thing to go through that experience, right? Because as a as an athlete, you experience it different than when you're a coach. So as a coach, when an athlete goes through an experience like this, one of the things you think about is how do I help the person to see the long term and help them to see that they're not always going to be in the position they're in right now. And it feels like forever while you're in it. So as a coach, you're trying to sort of orient that situation with the athlete and you're being their cheerleader a lot. As an athlete, when you're going through it, it really truly is life changing, especially if you take the sport as seriously as I do. And a number of people, I imagine everybody that listens to your podcast really enjoys powerlifting and just the pursuit of strength, right? When I was faced with this situation where I couldn't do the things that I really enjoyed doing, I couldn't squat, bench, or deadlift, I had to ask myself this hard question. I had to look in the mirror and go, why am I doing this?
Mhm.
Like knowing the prognosis, knowing how long it was going to take, because it was a nerve related injury,
Right.
which is, it's a very long journey. The cool thing about it is that we have plenty of success stories, people coming back from injury, right? So we know that there's a time course to this thing, but I knew that that time course was going to be about a year or so, right? And that's about what it was before I could consider doing what I would consider to be normal training.
Mhm.
And I had to look at myself in the mirror and go, do you have what it takes to fight through this for the next year to get back to doing squat, bench, and deadlift? Or is this potentially the end of your competitive, not that I was ever really truly competitive at a national, international level, but is this the end of you competing? Does John Garafano stop competing in powerlifting now? Or is this the opportunity to clarify that goal, to make you even hungrier than you've ever been before? And that was the thing that I had to really wrestle with for a while. And I'm educated. I've coached a lot of people. I've had people go through these injuries before. I've seen them come back. So I kind of knew it all up in here, up in my brain. I knew. But when it came to understanding in the heart and understanding that, yes, you can get back through this. Yes, you're going to have tough days. Yes, you're going to have good days too, but there's going to be a lot of tough days.
Yeah.
You're going to have to work through pain. You're going to have to work through discomfort and all that kind of stuff. Understanding that first person going through it is just something that you can't truly understand until you've done it. And it wasn't until I had a conversation actually with Dennis Cornelius at the airport at 21 USA Powerlifting Nationals. We were all stuck. Planes weren't going where they needed to. We were all stuck in the airport together. And I sat down and we were chatting over a beer. And, he said to me, he's like, yeah, I had the same thing happen to me. And he explained the whole thing. Truly, it took about 6 months to a year to come back. And to hear that Dennis Cornelius could do it, I was like, well, if Dennis can do it, right? So it wasn't really until I heard that first person account and was really sitting with someone and was like, yeah, what you're going through sucks. But man, I'm telling you, there's light at the other end of the tunnel and you will be back to doing this thing that you enjoy doing. So it was a great learning opportunity for me as a coach too, to go through that, because now I have the words. Yeah. Because I've been through it. So when someone gets injured, someone has a surgery, someone has a life interruption, whether that be kids, job, moving, whatever it is, I have the words to give them to say, hey, look, this isn't forever. And there are things you can do now that can set you up for success over the long term.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. And just a couple of kind of follow-up questions from that as well is because you spoke there about obviously speaking with Dennis Cornelius, and I think sometimes hearing a story like that can definitely think, oh yeah, I can do it. But you mentioned there it was a couple of times that you wrestled with that yourself in terms of that process. What was the obstacles or challenges that then you had to think that returned you back to the path, if you like, or the process of, right, I need to keep going? Because I know for a lot of lifters who have had injuries and those sorts of things, in practical terms, it isn't just a case of, oh, that's it, I've just got a year and I'm going to go get back on the platform. Within that year, there might be setbacks. There might be, it might progress too much, too fast, and then, they get burnt a little bit. What were kind of the strategies that you used and overcame, and having that probably that patience to stick with it, if you like?
Yeah, great questions, and honestly, all things that I can relate to, and I'm sure a lot of your audience can as well. The thing about it is, conceptually, I understood it was going to take about a year. And it actually took longer than that. To get back to previous strength levels, it was about little over 2 years. But 1 year before I could say, okay, I can do SBD, right? So I can do a squat, bench, and deadlift. Now, during that journey, there were setbacks. There were times that, things were progressing a little too fast, not progressing enough. The biggest challenge was when I was faced with asking myself, am I ever going to compete again? Was this the end of John Garafano competing? I knew I wanted to keep coaching because I love what I do. I love coaching athletes and helping them get stronger and realize their goals and all the self-actualization stuff, right? Like, I love that. I live for that. When somebody hits a PR, even if it's for a PB for a set of 5, like, I live for that stuff, But I had to ask myself, like, does John Garafano's journey of competing stop here because of this injury? And then if it does, well, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean to the gym that's behind me right now? Do I still keep this thing? Do I still train here? Do I train for bodybuilding? What do I train for? What's my motivation for the discomfort that I'm going to face through training? Because we're all face discomfort when we train. So what's this motivating factor behind it? And really what it came down to for me was, Stephen, I need to get under something that's really heavy that scares the crap out of me. Literally, that's what it comes down to. I need to get under a bar that scares the heck out of me, that makes me go, well, I'm either going to have to call an ambulance or I'm going to stand with this thing up. But one of those two things is going to happen and I'm going to go 3, 2, 1, go. And I live for that. Like, I live for the opportunity to push myself and sometimes see how strong I'm not, but also explore how strong I am. And whether that comes with squat, bench, or deadlift, or it comes through a trap bar deadlift and some modified benching or whatever it is, like, I'm going to find a way to challenge myself. And what I found was, if I kept reconnecting with the why there, it allowed me to focus on the process-oriented goals of, like, okay, John, here's what you need to do. You need to focus on getting this number of meals per day. You need to make sure that you're hitting these macros. You need to make sure you're sleeping this much. You need to do this many training sessions this week. And here's your plan. And if I focused on like executing on the habit-based stuff, of like getting the sleep, nutrition, training as much as I can and monitoring my stress levels and doing all of those things. If I take one step in front of the other, before I know it, I'm going to be back. I'll never forget. I was on a call with Mike Tashir and Hayden Pritchard, who is a researcher and one of our coaches or one of our former coaches at RTS. Hayden has since decided to stop coaching powerlifting, but at the time we were all together, we we're all training together, and over Zoom. And what was funny about it is I remember at that time not even being able to bench 50 kilos without strain.
Right.
And I remember Hayden saying to me, like, listen, man, just, keep at it, because before you know it, that 50 kilos is going to be 145 kilos. And he's totally right. A year and a half after that, it's 145 kilos. And it almost, in a sense, if like you blink, you can be like, wow, that just happened like that. Well, it happened like that because I focused on one step in front of the other. And so like, that was one of the things that I had to learn and grasp at is, there's that saying, you don't eat an elephant in one bite, it's one bite at a time, right? It's true. If you can focus on that one step, where you can focus on that one training week, the one training session, the one set, the one rep, and you just focus on that, it stacks up over time. Yeah. And before I knew it, I was back to training what I would consider normally. And that's what I tell athletes. It's like, hey, listen, you know what? Don't even think about being at your previous best. Don't even think about being your previous numbers or whatever it is. Let's just think about today. What's the right number to put on the bar today? Because if you do that today, then that's going to stack up, because then you do it tomorrow, you do it the next week, the next month, the next year, and think about where you're going to be.
Yeah, definitely. I think there was a couple of good explanations in there. And what was actually, it wasn't because of, I had a similar conversation with a client that I coach, and she didn't have an injury, but with her work schedule, travel schedule, and all those sorts of things, she could only actually compete once this year. No, she competed at the start of the year, and the next time she would compete would be like October, November time. So she was had an awesome competition, hit the most PBs that she had, which was actually really, really good. And then she kind of felt a little bit deflated because there was such a big chunk of time between competitions, which, isn't unusual, but because she's kind of gravitating from that beginner to intermediate, she'd done quite a lot of competitions just to get a time on the platform. And it was a case of, look, think about the numbers that we've got. Just think about what you can surpass from that. We can really lay a really good, solid foundation. And the analogy that I use when you mention about the process is, I think it was actually, I think it was in a book that I read. And basically it was, there's two children in the back of a car and they're driving to Disneyland. And on one side, they're looking out and being like, oh, look at the cows in the field. Look at that. Look at this. But the other child is saying, are we nearly there yet? Are we nearly there yet? Can we stop off? And it's both the same destination, but the experiences are going to be completely different. And I think in terms of goal setting, I think that's a really useful analogy, because, the people that are going to enjoy it a little bit more, focus on what can we do that day, is going to be really good and quite powerful. Touching on that as well, in terms of goal setting, trying to flip it from you working with athletes and you as a coach, what's kind of your approach to goal setting, and what have you found to be kind of some of the common pitfalls that some lifters kind of fall into?
I think you just said it so elegantly that, it comes down to the experience that you want to have, right? If you set outcome-based goals, you're focusing on the outcome. And then if life happens and you don't meet those outcomes by whatever timetable you've set, what is your motivation like at that point? So if you set a goal for yourself at the end of this training cycle to gain 15 kilos on your squat, but you only gained 7, does that mean that the training block was a failure? And if that's the criteria that you use as whether the block was a success or failure, you could be really impacting your motivation. And I want to put a caveat to that and say there's nothing wrong with having outcome-based goals. There's nothing wrong with want to see the numbers go up. That's what we all want. We all want to put more weight on our back than we did yesterday. Like that's that's a table stake here. But at the same time, it's just like the story that you said. Which kind of experience do you want to have? Do you want to be exploring and on your way to Disney and looking out the window and seeing, this sign, this landmark, whatever it is, and enjoying the ride? Or do you want to be sitting here counting every single kilo and whether that training session met your standard or not? And, because listen, your body's going to be your body regardless of what you do, right? So there's things that you can control. There are things within your control, and that could be to a certain extent your sleep. But as a new parent, or I will be a parent again, my sleep is only going to be so much that I can control. And a lot of people are in that circumstance, whether through work or travel or whatever it is, children, academic life, you can only control so much. Nutrition, you can control your nutrition to a certain extent. Some people can't, right? To their fullest extent. They can't count every gram and things like that. So you try to control the controllables, but outside of that, your rate of progress, how fast you're going to gain on each of your development cycles and each of your training cycles really comes down to whatever your body's going to let you do. And so do you want to have this experience where you have this inquisitive mind where you're curious about how is the training cycle going to go? What if you use this strategy and you use these movements and these exercises, these rep ranges, this frequency, this volume, and you're curious to see how that goes? Maybe you're curious to see how switching over to the alternate style deadlift, would go. Do you want to have that experience, this inquisitive, curious mind? Or do you want to constantly always be having that barometer of, did this session stack up with your expectations? It's very easy on a spreadsheet to say, I'm going to gain 5 kilos every single week and to kind of focus on that. And there's nothing wrong with that. I want to reiterate that there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, it comes down to like when it doesn't happen based on the expectations you've set. Now what? And that's kind of the position I was faced when I was injured of, I couldn't really set expectations because I didn't know what the weight was going to be. It was a really wonderful learning opportunity to show up and say, what can my body do today? Based on the constraints that I have, what is my body going to do today? And to lift like that for a really long stretch of time. And to just be open to whatever weight was going to be on the bar that day. It taught me something very novel, I think, because it's very easy, again, on a spreadsheet to say, I'm going to gain at this specific rate and to expect that. It's a totally different mindset to say, I'm going to explore today. What can I do? Mm-hmm. And so that would be one of the things that I would say to athletes as I coach them is try to have this inquisitive mind. Try to approach every training block curious of what this strategy is going to do, what this technique is going to do for your lift, and explore it, develop the situation. And as you get further, you can always change your mind. You can always change your direction. You can always change your training program. If you didn't gain at the rate that you wanted to in that last development block, you can always change your program. Now, don't be a program hopper, right? So don't change it every single week or every session that you're going into. Give it an honest shake, but just know that that's part of the journey. And high-level lifters do this all the time, right? They try a different strategy. They try a different style. It doesn't work the way they wanted to, or it works really well, and it becomes part of their greatest hits. And so I think that that is applicable to the really advanced lifter, along with the sort of early intermediate lifter as well. The novice lifters, it's just all about repetition. It's about repetition, really getting the rope, understanding the movements. Once you kind of get past that, if you can get into this more process-oriented, inquisitive mind as you go through, it makes the journey a lot more enjoyable, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of two questions from that, just as I was thinking as you were talking there. The entry point for powerlifting, there's lots of people get involved in strength sports, which is absolutely awesome. Getting involved in powerlifting and getting catching the powerlifting bug, if you like. However, some people getting involved in powerlifting haven't necessarily played other sports. Myself, I wanted to still do something competitive after stopping playing as much rugby. I work in a gym, so powerlifting was the natural progression from that to stay competitive. In terms of that curiosity, because I remember, playing rugby week to week, we might have to change tactics depending on the team, within the actual game, problem solving in terms of, right, how are we actually going to score more points than this, and adapting to that. Do you think because some people have only maybe just known powerlifting and haven't either played other sports or done other athletic things, if you like, that there isn't that level of curiosity, that it is a little bit too much spreadsheets and not basing on kind of like that feel, if does that kind of make sense?
Oh, absolutely. So there's a lot of lessons that team sport teaches you. You know, one of those is delayed gratification. And I think that that's one of the number one things I see with sort of novice, early intermediate lifters who do not have previous like team sport experience growing up. And it doesn't really matter when, whether that was college, high school, as a child, it doesn't really matter. It really comes down to what lessons the athletes have learned. I find the athletes who can focus on delayed gratification and become students of their sport. Like you've heard Mike Teixeira say that a bunch of times, and I so connect with that. It's very seldom that you see a high level power lifter that isn't incredibly knowledgeable about their sport, from the rules of the sport to the execution of their movements. Maybe they don't have the same words as a researcher, but when you talk to them, they're so inquisitive, they're so self aware. If you look at most major sports, that's the case because it takes a lot to be really good. It takes an insane amount of dedication. And that's one of the things that I think newer athletes, or I should say, athletes that don't have as much experience in athletics in general, have to learn. They have to learn how to become a student of the sport. And that's more than just the numbers. That's technique, that's taking care of the controllables, that's dealing with adversity, working through pain, right? Like I saw a funny, I forget who posted it, but I saw this funny reel on Instagram about like athletes who don't have any experience and needing to work through like an ankle being stiff or something like that. And like it was joking around. I think it might have been Tim Thibodeau that had posted it. I thought it was so funny. It's so true because athletes who athletes who don't have previous experience in athletics who come to powerlifting haven't had those life lessons yet. So it's a life lesson. And that's what's cool about having a coach is you can fast track some of those life lessons a bit. You could teach, like as a coach, I could teach lifters like, hey, here's how you can work through an injury situation, navigate what you can do, workload management, tempos, like all that stuff. You could teach those skills the same as you can teach some of the life lessons of delayed gratification and things of that nature. So I do see it happen a lot. And I honestly think that the athletes who stay in the sport for a really long time, that don't have just a whole bunch of early success and then kind of peak out and then they're done, they actually stay in this for 20 years or so, even longer than that. They're the ones who've worked through the delayed gratification, work through adversity, understand what's involved in hard work and how that pays off over time. Have a conversation with any masters lifter, right? Ask your M2, M3 and beyond lifters, and they're going to tell you that it's a lot of patience. It's a lot of hard work, and it's a lot of like just being along the ride, the process, focus on the small things, and then they add up.
Yeah, definitely. I was the first name that kind of jumped into my head there. I was lucky enough to have David Ricks on there
Yeah.
on the podcast, and an absolute legend and machine, basically in terms of what he keeps doing. And he said similar things, and I know he mentioned with his work and those sorts of things that it's not always been plain sailing, but it's that process that process that he's been able to stick to. One thing that you mentioned then is interesting, from speaking to rugby players and footballers who have played at quite a decent level. They have a really good understanding of the sport. That's why a lot of I know over in the UK anyway, they've gone into coaching with powerlifting. Not professional, but a lot of athletes are professional in all but name in terms of the hours that they put in and um all of the dedication and nutrition and everything that they're planning from there. Is that kind of what maybe separates, like what you said, the people who peak too soon and then drop off compared to people who have been in the sport 10 20 years, that they have that level of professionalism, if you like, in terms of that curiosity, enjoying the process, but then equally making sure you touched on it there yourself. Have I hit those macros? Have I had that amount of sleep? And kind of taking the rough with the smooth, if you like, in terms of what their journey is going to look like, because their goal is to still compete on the platform, and that's that's their goal, and they know that platform is always going to be there. If that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I have the pleasure of being able to say that I've worked with athletes from, teens all the way up to, I think the oldest athlete I've ever worked with was in his 80s
Right.
that still competed in powerlifting. And the coolest thing about that is to just talk to people and see what drives them, what motivates them. I remember talking to this um 80-year-old powerlifter who, by the way, high level powerlifter, had won IPF meets, and we were having a conversation, and I remember talking to him and saying, like, what keeps you going, like, because he has hit his previous best, right, and he won't be able to hit those same numbers again, per his comments to me. And my comment was like, well, what keeps you going, even though if your best lifts are behind you? And his answer I thought was really funny, and it describes exactly what you're talking about. Well, what else am I going to do? Because to him, it was like brushing his teeth. It was part of his routine. It's what he did. He got up and he trained. He trained this number of days a week. It's just like planning out his meals. It's just like everything else in his life that's part of his life. And I think that for a lot of us, that's what it becomes. Initially, it may be, you know what, I am attracted to powerlifting because I saw some influencer doing it and I thought it was cool. Or I had friends that were doing it, or I was part of a gym and they had a mock meet there and I thought that was pretty neat and decided, hey, let me give it a try. Or whatever your reason for getting started, it maybe starts with something that is extrinsic in nature, meaning outside of you, something tangible that you're trying to get, or something someone is telling you should do. And over time, it becomes this gradual shift toward an intrinsic thing, becoming part of you, just as much as you brush your teeth as it is to, get on a heavy bar and strain, right? So that's one of the things that I have seen in my coaching experience, is that there's a shift in goal setting, there's a shift in values, and eventually an athlete moves from this sort of extrinsic goal. I want to have this placement, I want to be at this meet, I want to have this total, these records, this top 5 in this drug, category of this class. It moves beyond those things to eventually, well, this is what I do, right? This is something that I enjoy. And what you start to have happen is, from that, when the person identifies enjoyment from this activity, they identify these intrinsic things that drive them to the sport and just the process of powerlifting. What you start to find from them is they start to look at the things that they can control and identify the things that they can't, and make peace with that to a certain extent, and then navigate the situation and find ways to control what they can. So I use the example of injury. I have an M2 lifter who, has back injuries that flare up from time to time. It's happened a long time. So what does he do in comparison to the junior lifter who has back pain? For the junior lifter who doesn't have that athletic experience, maybe they've never had back pain before, it can feel incredibly catastrophic. They might go into this kind of whirlwind of thought of like, oh no, what does this mean for me with powerlifting? Is it over? Am I ever going to be able to deadlift X amount of weight again? They get into this kind of spiral of thought. Whereas the person who's dealt with it before is like, yeah, okay, so what can I do today? I can't do a regular squat, so let me try SSB. Can't do that. Let's do a belt squat, move on. Let's try again later this week, right? So their thought process becomes more flexible. And that's one of the things that I think, when you start to see the people who've done this for a really long time and stay doing it, they develop the situation. They develop this sort of flexible, inquisitive mind. They go, well, I wonder what would be like if I try this strategy, or if I do this thing instead of doing that. So they all kind of run together for me. I think that the junior lifter lacks, and this is a generality, by the way, like what I'm saying is like the junior lifter with less experience competitively. So let's just imagine for a second someone that never did any sports and team sports in high school or anything like that, or in college. You have this junior lifter and they just don't know what they don't know. Right. And so they haven't had these experiences to learn from. Whereas the person who's an M2 who's been through this before, they've learned the school of hard knocks, and they know that time course of injury, hey, a training cycle is going to be a little rough because they've got travel or a new job. They've been through it before. Like for me, I'm having my 4th child, been through this before. I know what's going to happen. I know what to expect, right? Like, and it doesn't mean that the world is over and my gains are going to stop. It just means that things are going to be a little crazy for a little bit, but it'll get better. That's one of the things that I think that the less tenured is probably that's the term I'm looking for. The less tenured powerlifter, the less tenured athlete doesn't have. They just don't have that view because they've not been there before.
Yeah. And I think that's something similar to so basically we run like an internship program with coaches. And yeah, I use that quote quite a lot. You know, you don't know what you don't know, because sometimes, you know, I'll say something and that you can see the light bulb goes off in the head of, oh yeah, that makes complete sense. However, sometimes, you know, to gain experience, you need to experience. I don't know if that makes sense, but you need to go through those things. And a couple of things that, you know, follow up from there is with the developing that experience as a newer lifter. Those things of I want to hit this target, I want to break this record. And you mentioned there that, you know, at some point that's going to change to it's just like brushing my teeth. This is the routine that I've got from there. Is there a certain point where that phase or that transition takes too long and it actually ends up being detrimental to performance? You know, that they're not enjoying the time on the platform, or they're getting too fixated on numbers and they're actually forgetting about, you know, other things are slipping in terms of sleep or nutrition, and they're actually adding more stress onto themselves as opposed to enjoying that process. What's kind of your experience with that?
Absolutely. I think sometimes when athletes feel like there's this looming deadline, they must hit these numbers by this specific date, the decisions that are made in the short term can be very short-sighted. So, for example, I have a junior lifter who was kind of nearing the end of his competitive junior years, which to him felt like, well, am I going to be competitive in the open? Am I going to be competitive internationally in the open? And if I don't maximize my time, you'll hear this a lot. I need to maximize my time in the juniors or maximize my time in the open. You'll hear lifters say that often. And I don't disagree. Like there's good reason to want to maximize your time in whatever position you're in. But it's not like you're going to suddenly will that into existence, right? And you have to also respect that your body is only going to adapt as fast as your body is going to adapt. And the example that I have is, so I'm sitting with this lifter, we're talking, and he's like, yeah, I want to hit these numbers by this date. And the question to ask after that is, well, what happens if you don't hit it? What does that mean for you? So if you don't hit it, and you know, you start talking about like how they're not sleeping because they're worried about the numbers, they're worried about the training session tomorrow, they're fretting over the macros, and they didn't get the last meal in, so they're not eating enough, or they're eating too much, and they start like worrying and focusing too much on the small stuff. They forget the bigger picture, that this is just one meet and hopefully an entire career worth of meets. What I like to tell athletes when they come to me and they tend to be a little bit less tenured is, I want to meet you where you're at with your goals. And I want to help you maximize whatever time you have in whatever age category you're in, or in the open, or whatever it is. I want to help you maximize that time. But I also, my goal is to make an ambassador of the sport too. And I want to have you in this for the next, 10, 20, 30, 40, however years you want to do this for. And I want to remember that. So if we have you compete, 6 times a year, well, what does that do to athlete burnout? What does that do to your psyche? I just had a conversation actually with an athlete about this, who decided ultimately he wants to take a back seat for a little bit with competition to kind of chill out a little bit, because he's been pushing the gas too hard for a little too long, competing 5 to 6 times a year. And it's not that there's anything inherently wrong with that, but there are sacrifices that have to be made to compete at a high level that frequently. Sacrifices to your personal life, academic life, career, things like that. And that can't, for most people, they can't necessarily sustain that for a very long period of time. Maybe short term, year, 2 years. We actually had on our podcast, Newton Chang, who is an awesome athlete. And he was talking about the self-authoring person, that So I forget the book that he read this in, but one of the things that he was bringing up is that there's a psychological researcher who basically had said that adult sort of maturity kind of continues. Your maturity, your mindset continues beyond your adolescent years. And one of the first places that we tend to be is this kind of self-authoring mindset. And, if you think about that for a moment, it makes sense. The ability to say, I'm going to put everything else aside and focus on this one thing, powerlifting. I'm going to be monolithic. I'm only going to focus on that. So friendships be damned, relationships be damned, academic, whatever it is, I'll take a job doing whatever just so that I can make it to the gym for these 4-hour training sessions 6 days a week, right? And that probably is great for your total, at least initially. But is it great for your total if you charted that and you try to keep that up when you try to have life responsibilities, when you try to have relationships, and if you decide to have children, you decide to move, whatever, can you keep that up? Eventually you start to see that that's hard to maintain. And that's one of the things I try to do with my lifters is try to navigate the landscape as those things change. I have athletes that I've coached for over a decade, which has been really cool to see, like how they've matured from being a less tenured athlete to now, and kids and job and all this kind of stuff, and help them to navigate those things. Sometimes that's away from powerlifting, by the way, and that's okay. Just like they came to powerlifting, they may go away, they may come back. You see that happen all the time with M1, M2 lifters. They're like, kids are out of the house. I'm going to do this fun thing I want to do again. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think the big thing is trying to, again, develop that flexible mindset and being able to kind of see things as not necessarily sort of black or white, see the gray area. It's not all or nothing. You can still train when you have these responsibilities. There is a way to still do powerlifting, and that's the big word, is and, it's not an or, and have relationships, have professional responsibilities, relationships, things of that nature.
Yeah, definitely. I think it comes back to that all or nothing mentality, that it's just right. This is it. This is everything. Whereas, like what you mentioned there about the lifter that you coach who's in his 80s, that platform's always going to be there. Powerlifting's been around for a long time. There's always going to be competitions and things to do. Myself, having taken a step back from powerlifting, I did a charity deadlift competition a couple of weeks ago, and it was like, I wouldn't mind fancy doing a full competition for there. But like what you say, changing gyms, changing jobs, moving house, there's all those things there that, it's like with anything. I think for a lot of people, if you're going to commit to something, you want to commit to it, whereas you still keep your hand in. Like, I'm still squatting, benching and deadlifting, but just having a little bit of fun with it, like what you mentioned there about the curiosity about it, which rings well with me, because that's kind of like the phase I'm in at the minute. I know that I will compete again. I've kind of like signpost or marked a competition at the end of the year. But yeah, it's not a case of once you leave powerlifting or step away from powerlifting, that's it. That it's the end of the world. You can never come back. A couple of things that you mentioned.
Well, just to add to that real fast, I mean, look at Mike Teixeira just this past year, right? He took 6 years off. I mean, Mike has competed at the highest levels of competition there are. Okay. So, if he can do that, take 6 years off, come back and have fantastic totals, fantastic placing, in a division where, he may not be the youngest person in his division anymore. The fact that he can do those things is a real testament, and have 4 kids, have moved internationally, run Reactive Training Systems, have a very busy life. Like, if he can do that, so can you. You could take time off and come back, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's countless stories of that. And that's the cool thing, is you see this kind of all the time. I'll give a quick example. I have lifters who, when the USA Powerlifting IPF split happened and Powerlifting America formed, we were having conversations, and it was like, oh no, what do I do? It's like, whatever seems like the best idea at the time, and just know you can change your mind. Go compete in Powerlifting America if you want to go the IPF route. Go ahead and do that, or whatever your IPF affiliate is, go ahead and do that. And If something happens and you don't like your experience and don't want to continue doing that, you can always change your mind. I have an athlete who did powerlifting for like 10 years. We were working together. He just recently told me he wants to throw his hand in at doing some CrossFit. Cool. Okay. No problem. Go try it. And you know what? You could always decide this isn't for you, or you could turn around and be a multi-sport athlete. There's a athlete who does CrossFit, weightlifting, powerlifting, and bodybuilding that I coach. He does multiple sport and strongman. Excuse me, I forgot that too. He's like an Eric Helms, right? So does all these different things, and it's cool because he gets to explore all these different things and keep himself interested. I see nothing wrong with that, because if anything, that's the guy who's going to keep being active into his 80s. And let's be honest, physical activity, particularly resistance training, is one of the best things you can do as you age. So if you want to go even taking a step further in terms of like promoting health, because we should be sort of promoting health too. If you think about like health promoting behaviors, that's the kind of thing you want to see, a person who's remaining active. So versus like, oh, I'm done powerlifting. That's it. I'm just gonna, gain a bunch of fat and I'm done being physically active.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to touch on actually, because did you ever watch the documentary West Side versus the World?
I started to. I never finished it though.
I watched that, and there's a clip in it where, and it kind of goes that point about speaking about health, where there's a point where you get one of the lifters gets told to increase a weight class, and he's already like, can't bend over to like tie his shoes and those sorts of things, and it's kind of that thing of, there's, what's the phrase, every athlete is a human, and every human is an athlete. So you've still got to be able to enjoy life, and think about. And the biggest thing was, again, maybe a little bit of a tangent, but during lockdown and COVID, quite a lot of my clients had home gyms, but a good amount didn't. And it was kind of like, right, well, what do I do now? And when we speak about that identity of, well, I identify as a power lifter. Okay, well, what are you going to do now then? And, a lot of people ended up improving their health, losing weight, improving their fitness, which actually, full circle, ended up improving the lifts when they went back into the gym, because then they weren't spending, 5, 10, 15 minutes between sets or feeling battered after some workouts. There's one thing as well on there, which and it was kind of a good example when you mentioned about your client there who does weightlifting, powerlifting, strongman, CrossFit, all those sorts of things. And I think sometimes when we're talking about sort of like the psychological aspects of it, a lot of people, have their set routines. They use the same equipment. They have everything in the bag. They've got those routines. So when it comes to powerlifting, strongman, and weightlifting, there's lots of different variables in there, and not everything is going to be the same. How, or what's your experience of clients or athletes who get too sort of soaked up in, they think that their routine, their equipment, I know the routine when we're doing squat, bench, or deadlift is important, but in terms of that gym routine, the equipment that they use becomes too overbearing, and they actually lose sight of what the session is. Like the small rocks end up becoming the big rocks, rather than actually just getting the work done.
Love the analogy, going back to the rocks. And I kind of felt like you were taking some shots at me there. I feel like you were like looking over my shoulder, being like, hey, John, I know how you are with training. No, listen, I think it's human nature to want a certain degree of routine and predictability and control. I think all of us want that to a certain extent, some more than others, right? But I think that that's a normal thing. It's normal to say, hey, listen, I know that I need to do my sport, and my sport consists of these things, so I must practice them. That's normal to want to have that specific practice. And I think, though, that sometimes that principle of specificity can be taken too far, where it's like, if I don't have my belt on during warmups, it's not specific enough. If I don't have my heeled shoes, that's it. I can't squat today, and we can sort of sometimes, take things a bit too far with that logic. It's like, hey, if you don't have access to a bench press and all you can do are push-ups, does that mean that suddenly you can't bench press anymore? Well, I can't tell you the number of clients that I had during COVID that were doing a ridiculous amount of push-ups and came back and actually were better bench pressers. So like there's a ton of examples of that we could come up with them. I think again, it comes back to sort of questioning that. Like if I don't have the Eleiko bar with the Eleiko collars and calibrated plates, it's not a squat. It doesn't count. Well, no, it still counts if it's this pound plate that's cast and you have no idea if it's 44 pounds or 48 pounds. Funny tangent. I am the type of person who likes to have data. And so I decided to weigh all of my old non-calibrated plates. I had ones that were 52 and some that were 42 pounds. And so imagine that, trying to figure that out. But even still, does that mean that you can't train because you don't have like the best of the best equipment? No. And I think that sometimes questioning that stuff is really important, because we can get caught in that as athletes. We can also get caught in that too as coaches. When the athlete, we write this thing on paper, we tell them, hey, I want you to do 2-count pause squat triples up to a 9 RPE. We write that on a piece of paper. Athlete says, just wasn't feel right, so I did SSB today. We can sometimes be like, ooh, well, you didn't do the program. It's like, how important was it whether they did an SSB or they did a 2-count pause squat? Maybe it is, maybe I'm not. It depends on maybe it is and maybe it isn't, depending on context. But I think it comes back to, again, that flexible mindset of being able to help the athlete explore it. It's like, hey, you forgot your belt. That doesn't mean you can't train. Maybe you have to make some adjustments, but that doesn't mean that you're not making a deposit into the training, account today. And that's one of the things to kind of think about, is like, what kind of a deposit are you making? Maybe it's not the exact deposit that we had intended when we wrote it on a piece of paper, but you are making a deposit. Even if you ended up just using a leg press, okay, because you couldn't squat, you are training the muscles that are involved in your squat. There is going to be some importance there. A perfect example of that. I traveled for a vacation. It was like 2 weeks, and I didn't have access to a gym during the first week of travel. I intended being the keyword, to have access to a gym on the second week of travel. So the first week I brought my Exerfly, like portable flywheel with me, and was doing like belt squats and, all kinds of like flywheel deadlifts and stuff. And I trained 3 times. The second week I got COVID and couldn't train at all. So that's 2 weeks, no barbell on my back. I came back and I'm like, oh no, what's going to happen to my estimated 1RMs and how is training going to go? I was down like 6 or 7% of what I would expect. And to give some context, I normally start my development blocks 5% weaker. So I was 2% weaker than I would have projected. Is that really meaningful? That could be as much as a statistical error as it is an actual, like, real hard number, So I look at that and I go, man, you could be so much more flexible than you think. And we have research that shows that too, that people can have training cessation, come back and regain really quickly. So we have those anecdotes, we have our own personal experiences, but yet again, we can get caught up in that wanting to control the variables. If I miss a rep or I miss a set or I don't do this training session, the whole block is over. And I would challenge athletes to be a bit more flexible with their mindset. And that's one of the things I try to do with people.
Yeah, I think it's that one phrase that I like to use today is that fact versus feeling. So you might feel as though, oh no, my estimated 1 rep max has gone down, where the facts are that actually, yeah, there might be a statistical error, but in the grand scheme of things, 1%. It's like that thing of, if you increase everything by 1% over the course of a year, that's 52% that you've increasing. I thought I'd got the weeks of the year wrong there.
No, you got it right. You're good.
It's that thing of,
Yeah.
you want to be basing it. I think a lot of it is going to be based on feel. I think the numbers are really important. However, there's like what we've, kind of come in full circle, if you like, of, it's that process. It's that thing of, yes, there's going to be challenges and things that can throw you off, but those things of, right, how are we feeling? What actually are the numbers saying? Because we like what you've mentioned, we've gone through a couple of examples of people who have gone from time off or who have had injuries or whatever it may be, and actually come back and smashed it out of the park. Quite a lot of topics covered there, John, and a couple of tangents thrown in. But actually, I've got 2 final questions to ask. So the first one, as a fan of the RTS podcast, how does it feel being on the other side of the podcast, being a guest? And then the other last question that I like to ask is, from everything that we've chatted about there, and for everyone listening, whether it's coaches or lifters, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom?
Cool. So the first thing that I want to say is that I love that you have to rein me in. So that's cool. I can just chat, and when you decide to change topic, you get to do that. I don't have to be thinking about it. I also like the fact that you have to write the show notes and do all the edits, and I don't. So that's great. This is enjoyable. It's a lot of it's actually kind of fun to be on this side of the microphone, and the podcasting. Words of wisdom. I think I'll break it up for coaches. Coaches, I think it's an opportunity for us to show up under leadership for our athletes, to help them to see the big picture. And that could be just like you had just said, hey, you feel like training is going to crap right now, but let me pull up your charts. Actually, this is what the charts show. It's a down session or 2 down sessions, but look at the course of the last 3 months, 6 months, year. When I do check-ins with athletes every week, I'm bringing up their 3-6 month trend line, and we're looking at it, paying attention to the big picture, and sometimes it's even looking at longer than that too. So I think as coaches, it's an opportunity for us under leadership to show up and teach that, because that's a skill that we can teach, and know that when you're an athlete and you're in that moment of you expecting a certain weight and it not being that, that's really hard to deal with emotionally. I see it in myself as an athlete, and then I have to remind myself. Mike and I have conversations when that happens for him too. So no one is immune to that. But as coaches, it's an opportunity for us under leadership to show up under that capacity. Athletes, what I would say is just know, going back to the facts versus feelings, that listen, you can explore and you have the right to change your mind. You can explore a different training strategy, a different sport altogether, taking time off, doing this, doing that, and know that you have the opportunity to change your mind. You could decide, hey, for the next year of my life, I really want to do nothing but powerlifting because I want to maximize my time in the juniors. Cool. Go and do that. If that's what really drives you and you're excited about it, do it. But know that it's okay for you to change your mind after that too. And it's okay to take your foot off the gas for a little while. There's nothing wrong with that. So you always have this opportunity to change your mind, where you compete, how often you compete, how much you try to prepare yourself for competition. You have the opportunity to change direction at any time.
I think some really good take-home points and words of wisdom for both there. Thanks a lot, John, for taking the time to jump on. Really, really enjoyed chatting with you today. If anyone has any questions about what we've chatted about today, see the content that yourself and Reactive Training Systems put out there, where can people find you or reach out to you?
Absolutely. So Instagram, probably the easiest. John G_RTS is the easy way to remember. So you can reach out there. If you're looking for more individualized help, you can go to the Reactive Training Systems site and send us a message there. Be happy to talk with anybody.
Awesome. Thanks again. Like I say, really enjoyed chatting with you today. I think a lot of practical takeaways and some really good information for a lot of lifters going there. I think there's some topics there that I know I can relate to, where I am in terms of my own training, and obviously, in the past as well. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.